G'day everybody, my name is Elliot Waters and you're listening to the Dysregulated podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in. Today's episode, I'm just going to sort of ad-lib this one, I think. There's been a few gaps in my story ever since I left hospital about how things are going. So I want to sort of tie that all up nicely so we know where we are now and what we're going to try to do looking down the track, aiming forward. So you may remember I went to the Maitland Private Psychiatric Ward, and the goals of that was for a complete medication overhaul, which I got. So I walked in there, I was on sertraline, I was on 2 antipsychotics, I was on, from memory, lithium, the mood stabilizer, I was on propranolol, clonidine. What else did they have me on? Vyvanse and lorazepam, the benzodiazepine PRN. So a big part of my stay was to get off these medications that really weren't helping at all anyway, and see if we can find one medication in particular that may be able to do the heavy lifting for me. And the theory around this was that because I just had a newly diagnosed condition, high-functioning autism, previously known as Asperger's, the idea was that these newer medications, like the SSRIs or the SNRIs, and even the new age, new school of antipsychotic medications, that they just don't work very well for people who are wired a little bit differently. And according to my doctor, he said we're going to have to go back old school because they're the ones that seem to work the best. Which I was more than happy to hear that, because I'd tried most of the new school, the new age medications, and they've done jack shit, to be completely honest. They hadn't done much at all. So I was there for 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks, and the majority of that time was spent withdrawing from these medications. I just remember another one I withdrew from, Lyrica, pregabalin as well, I was on when I went in, and those withdrawals in particular were very, very difficult. So you look at my story and there's all these medications. My brain is bombarded with these different medications, but then you look at our outcomes or our measures of success, and you can see that we are still faltering very, very badly. So you got to ask the question, are any of these medications really enriching my life at all? And my summation at that point was, no, they are not. So a big part of my time at Maitland Private Hospital on the psychiatric ward there was to get off these numerous pills. That was the first job. And then secondly, pick some other medications, or even in this case, it was just one singular medication, to take over the heavy lifting, which might actually prove to be better suited for the job. So that's where the tricyclic antidepressant Clomipramine comes into it. So a little bit about Clomipramine is that it is old school. Tricyclics come from the 50s and 60s. They are the old school stuff, but they work really, really well. The reason they're not prescribed as much anymore is, as far as I understand, for 2 reasons. The first reason being, if you have too many of them, you can overdose and die. So a bit risky if you're giving someone with suicidal tendencies and you give them Clomipramine, well, that can end badly. And the other reason is too because of side effects. Now, I had lots of side effects on Clomipramine that I haven't had on any other or any of the newer medications I'd tried previously. So, for example, sweats, and I'm still getting this today, lots of body sweats, just flushed all the time. Another one was inability at times to urinate. So I would be standing there, as a man, standing there in front of the toilet, just waiting and waiting. And honestly, often I would just go, look, like out loud, come on, you bastard, come on. And then a few drips might come out, and then eventually it releases, and then, we go to the toilet. That's good. But that's very frustrating, you don't want to be standing a minute, 2, 3 minutes just waiting for something to happen. Especially if you're at a footy game, watching my Newcastle Knights, so at the stadium, and there's the big trough and I've got everyone either side of me and I'm just standing there doing nothing. The anxiety tends to start to hit in those moments, that's for sure. But anyway, so urination problems was a big one. Another side effect from clomipramine, the tricyclic antidepressant, was blurred vision. So getting very blurred vision at times. And vivid dreams would be another one as well. Very, very vivid dreams, which aren't always in the positive. So, but the real biggest side effects that I was concerned about were the urination problem and also the sweating that was coming with it as well. So the good news is a lot of the urination issues have sorted themselves, which is great. The sweating is still a problem, especially at the moment because it is summer here in Australia and it's hot and it's been muggy, very humid, and as a result, I have just been dripping with sweat and gets a little bit embarrassing, but what can you do? But this is the thing. Those side effects I just mentioned, I guess I also had kidney pain, got that checked out. Felt like there might be pain around the liver, got that checked out, and the liver's actually not in great shape, which is something I'll be keeping an eye on. I've got another blood test to do soon about that. But yeah, there's been a few things sort of going on, and it's like, well, a lot of these things didn't happen before clomipramine, but now they're happening. So then you got to ask yourself the question, when we look at these side effects and how they're affecting me, is the clomipramine, with all that considered, providing us with benefits? And the answer has been yes. I do not have the obsessive, negative, intrusive thoughts anywhere near as frequently or with anywhere near as much potency as I was getting before. And I remember I said to the doctor first up, when I went to Maitland psychiatric ward, I said, look, I don't care if I get all these range of symptoms, but if I can get up every morning and not have to fight with everything I've got just to get out of bed, just to eat a bowl of cereal, just to have a shower, well, to me, we're winning. We're winning bigly. So there you go. That's clomipramine. After we withdrew from all the other antidepressants, clomipramine won the day. And it's interesting. I was shown a model of the clomipramine molecule and its receptor sites versus sertraline's molecule and receptor sites. And this is sort of how they're different and why it appears maybe for people wired differently like me, these older school antidepressants work. So you've got the molecule for sertraline and it's got one little receptor site. That's it, because they're very selective. Selective is the key here. They selectively target certain serotonin receptors, and that's it. Whereas clomipramine, on the other hand, this molecule's got things popping off it every way. It's just, there's just receptors here, there's receptors there, there's receptors here, there's another one here. And they don't just hone in on specific serotonin receptors or transporters. It just about goes to all of them. And it's looking at norepinephrine as well. It works on histamine. There was something else which I just can't remember as well offhand what it also focuses on. So clomipramine doesn't selectively account for what it's shooting for. It just grabs anything that fits the bill, whereas SSRIs are very, very finely tuned. And he said, Elliot, because your brain is, all over the shop, essentially, we need a medication that won't be selective, because we need to go to all corners of your brain to see some benefit. And that's what clomipramine does. It is not selective at all. It's got all these different receptor sites. This thing goes everywhere. And that's why the side effects are a lot worse too, because it does go to areas that maybe it doesn't need to go to. But at the same time, for someone like me with such a broad array of psychiatric concerns, these are the sorts of medications that seem to work best. The ones that just go everywhere. They're hitting every spot. Maybe they're hitting a spot that doesn't need to be hit, but for every one that maybe it gets wrong, it's hitting another 3 that we really did need to get hit. So there you go, clomipramine. So that took many weeks to titrate down from all the various medications I was on to just clomipramine. And things were going good. Things could still be a bit better, I thought, but things were going pretty good. So after 4 weeks, we discharged from the psychiatric ward. Now, the problem here is that we discharged back to the real world where now I don't have a psychiatrist, but I do have a really, really good GP. So after a few weeks, I noticed that, 80% of these obsessive thoughts were being stopped by the Clomipramine, which is good, but there's still 20 to 30% over time getting through, and they seem to hurt a lot. And not only that, a lot of my anxious symptoms, the social anxiety component and just this general fear I have around living and not wanting to take risks because that means something's surely going to go wrong, those parts of my psyche still were around and had not abated at all. So having no psychiatrist to really ask this question to, once again, Elliot did his reading. And I thought, I think we're missing a piece of the puzzle, the medication puzzle. Because I'm realistic in the fact that the medications with me can only go so far. Then eventually it's really targeted individual psychotherapy, which is where we need to really dig into my psyche and straighten out some of those things that might have happened in the past that are still influencing how things happened to me, for me, today. So I'm definitely not a medication-only type of guy, certainly not. But at the same time, I think the medication plays a big role, and for me to be able to conduct myself through therapy and do it properly and be committed to it and look for change and achieve that, I need a medication regimen that backs me up all the way. So although the medications may not do the straightening out of my psychological inconsistencies, you could say, but the medications give me the confidence to do it and then pursue it. That's what I'm hoping. That is what I'm hoping. So I did a lot of research, and I come up with a medication called, we're going to hear a lot more about it moving forward, called lamotrigine. Lamotrigine originally developed for people with epilepsy, but has shown great efficacy for those with bipolar disorder. He's a little bit different than the other mood stabilizers you might have heard of, like lithium, for example, of which I've had quite a bit of experience with. So what lithium does is tend to bring the highs lower to a manageable space. But lamotrigine appears to do the opposite. It brings the lower side of things up towards a much healthier, happier baseline. So lamotrigine's pushing from the bottom of the scale, whereas lithium tends to be pushing from the top of the scale. Quite often people are prescribed both. If you ask someone with bipolar type 1 or type 2, but predominantly type 1 from my experience, you may be offered both medications because they're both working from the different ends of the equation. But for me, you look at my mood charts, you don't see that much mania or hypermania, Like most of the time I'm in some sort of depressive episode, and that has been very consistent over a very long time now. And this has always been my argument. If I have bipolar and my mood charts and just my gut feeling on how life is going, which is usually just about spot on, if I'm presenting as mostly depressive with the odd spike here and there, but really like 80% depressive, 10% normal, 10% maybe manic or hypermanic, that tells me that it's the 80% we need to sort out. That's the big part. And I've always thought lamotrigine is the one that goes after the 80%. But for some reason, I've never until now been given the opportunity to use lamotrigine. But this time, I was very, very determined to, because I've done a lot of research on lamotrigine now. Too much, a bit of an obsession. There's the autism coming through again, I'd say. But, I've done this research because I want to live the best quality life that I can. So, I'm trying to really drive progress as far as my own world is concerned. And it is hard when you don't currently have a psychiatrist, and the only psychiatrist you could see is in hospital, which says waiting lists, and a lot of money to be spent, and it's just difficult. So I remember I went to my GP not long after. I said, "Doc, you'll never believe it. You are now my psychiatrist. Congratulations." And he laughed, and we both agreed that maybe we would still try to find someone else in the psychiatry world to sort of take me on. But in the meantime, my GP is playing the role of psychiatrist, and he was confident enough with my research and what I presented to him to give lamotrigine a try. So the clomipramine stays, but the lamotrigine gets added on. And there are, if you were interested, there are case studies of people using clomipramine with lamotrigine, in particular looking at OCD. So there's some nice reading there if you were to go on to Google Scholar, which I do a lot. The problem is with lamotrigine is you've got to titrate slowly. So you start off first week, hopefully I get this timeline right, first week, 25 milligrams. Second and third week, 50 milligrams. Fourth week, 100 milligrams. Fifth week, 200 milligrams. And that's the therapeutic dose that we're aiming for. So those titration times can vary a little bit. So by all means, don't just say or hear what I just said and that's gospel, because it's not. It's different for different people, but that is generally the way it goes. And 200 milligrams is the therapeutic dose that we're aiming for. The reason you can't just go boom into 200 milligrams of lamotrigine is because if you titrate too quickly, there is a chance of skin diseases, Stevens syndrome, I think one of it is called, and at worst, titrating too quickly can cause death. So as we know, these medications are pretty hard hitting stuff, and you've got to respect them, that's for sure, because things can go wrong in a big, big way. And it's been, look, I'll tell you, someone who is impulsive and, doesn't like to wait around too long and admittedly, I haven't seen the positive results of lamotrigine being introduced to my regimen just yet. There's been a big part of me going, let's bump it up now, We're not getting any rashes. We should be right. Just bump it up now. But that's where you can get caught out. So I have not done that. I'm going to wait the time that is required before we get to that therapeutic range. Then we can have a real assessment of how things are going. So we'll see. It's very, very difficult, the waiting game, but hey, you got to do it, and hopefully in the long run, it will be worth it. That's the plan. But life hasn't been easy since we left Maitland, that's for sure. There's a lot of things which I need to confront in therapy, psychotherapy, that I just haven't been able to because I just don't have the money to do it. Psychology, psychiatry, GP visits, it costs a lot of money, and some of my medications are proving quite expensive as well. So it's been difficult, that's for sure. I mentioned before I'm not on a stimulant, or I wasn't on a stimulant for my ADHD. That has now changed. So what we're using is modafinil. Modafinil is like dexamphetamine light, I suppose. It helps a little bit with the ADHD stuff, but not brilliantly. It's not actually signed off for ADHD use, but off-label it can be used, and that's what we're using it for now. Because in Australia, if you don't have a psychiatrist, which I don't at the moment, they're the only ones that can prescribe stimulants such as Vyvanse, dexamphetamine, Ritalin, Concerta, all that sort of stuff. So the best that the GPs can do really is this modafinil. So that's why we decided to go down this route. But again, because it's off-label, it's very, very expensive. And, there's a cost-benefit analysis, I suppose, that needs to be done, and I'm just not sure it's doing the job. And what that means is that a lot of my ADHD symptoms are out of control in a lot of ways. I'm not achieving that much during the day. I'm struggling to focus. I'm doing half jobs without completing things. My memory's not very good, which I might add can be a side effect of lamotrigine. So, there's a lot going on in this petri dish, that's for sure. But at the moment, as it stands, while I'm talking to you now, my medication regimen is clomipramine, 200 milligrams, lamotrigine, 50 milligrams, titrating upwards towards 200 milligrams, and 200 milligrams of modafinil in the morning. but I just don't think this is going to be the right mix. I'm hoping the lamotrigine will really come through for me. I hope, seeing as though I handpicked this medication myself, and then eventually swap out the modafinil for a stimulant that has much better efficacy. And then hopefully then we'll be primed, ready to go to rip in a therapy and really, really see the benefits there. And then we move on to such a better way of living. That is what I'm really, really hoping for. Because, the last couple of weeks have been very difficult. Very difficult. I don't like always being so negative on this show, but what can I say? They have been very difficult. But at the same time, we're staying positive. We're not just sitting on our hands. Like I've been making phone calls to Toronto Private Hospital about a outpatient psychoanalysis group. There's talk of potentially going back to Maitland Private Hospital, the psychiatric ward there, to continue the medication review that we were doing. There's also been a referral sent off to an intermediate stay course at Newcastle's James Fletcher Hospital. So that would be 6 weeks inpatient, 6 weeks. And it's very, very intensive, psychiatrists working around the clock. That sort of thing seems to appeal to me because I am a very complex case, and that's all the people they want. Complex cases only. Well, I've never met anyone with as many labels or diagnoses as me, or have tried as many different medications as me. So that might be something to look forward to as well. Don't know. So there's a few things on the horizon. Don't worry. We're not just, feeling like we've been defeated or anything. We're definitely not. We are pushing. We just need life to give us something. I just need life to give me a win, something I can really grab hold of and be like, all right, we launch from here, let's go. But I just don't have anything like that at the moment. There's a lot of feelers are out there, but I need someone or something or some company to say, right, you can offer something that we really want, and we're going to make sure that you, get the money for it you deserve, and here you go, because, that would enable me to get back into psychology, which I need, and, be able to afford all these different medications and programs, and yeah, so there's a bit going on. But anyway, that is a bit of an overview about what has happened since my time at Maitland Private Hospital on the psychiatric ward there, what we tried to achieve, what we've had to do since then, and a bit of an idea of what might be coming. There's plenty coming, for sure. For sure. There is a lot coming. These changes that I've made, I don't think are solidified just yet, by no means. And the reason I know that is because my mood hasn't improved anywhere near as much as what we would want. So that means we still haven't quite nailed it down yet. But as always, I will keep researching and looking at new ways, new possibilities, talking to mental health professionals, trying to come up with the best way forward for me. And I will also tell you guys all about that here on the show too. And maybe if something works for me, you might find it might work for you too. Or at least it gives you another option to think about. So keep that in mind. So hopefully together, we're going to all start really kicking those goals soon, because we're trying very bloody hard. The more you put in, they say, the more you get out of life. That's what they reckon. And I reckon a few of us have been putting a lot in, but we're just about ready to get the fruits of our labour now. Surely. I'm trying to stay positive, but I'm committed to that idea. It's all about the turnaround for us. Anyway, thank you for listening to this episode. It was a bit all over the place. I hope it sort of makes sense and offers a bit of insight. That would be great. I know at times some of these episodes can be a bit doom and gloom, and, they sort of have to be sometimes, or else I wouldn't be telling the truth. But this one, I hope, shows that although things are pretty difficult, we're still shooting for the stars, baby. No way. No question about that. We are still looking up and trying to reach our greatest heights. We just need a few things to click into place. All right, thank you for listening. Remember, if you're enjoying the show, feel free to like, subscribe, give us a great rating, hopefully 5 stars, and share it around with your mates. And you can follow the show on Instagram at thedysregulated.podcast, or you can even follow me on Instagram at elliot.t.waters. Okay, until next time, see you guys. Goodbye.